Very Bad Wizards is a podcast with a philosopher, my dad, and a psychologist, Dave Pizarro, having an informal discussion about issues in science and ethics. Please note that the discussion contains bad words that I'm not allowed to say, and knowing my dad, some very inappropriate jokes.
Bad people go to hell? I don't think so. You think that? Act that way. A hell exists on Earth? Yes.
The great boss has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have. Pay no attention to that man. Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.
Welcome to Very Bad Wizards. I'm Tamler Summers from the University of Houston. Dave, the notorious candy mom, former VBW guest Agnes Callard is back in the news again. This time the subject of 90,000 word New Yorker profile about her polycule with her ex-husband and former student, now husband. What is it about this University of Chicago ancient philosopher that you liberal elites find so fascinating?
You're the East Coast liberal elite. You tell me. Does she just have an amazing agent who is pitching New Yorker journalists stories about marriage? Like, I don't get it. I really don't. I don't have anything bad to say about Agnes Callard. I just don't understand the fascination.
Oh my God, they've gotten to you too.
I don't get it. I skimmed that article.
Yeah.
And I just agree with some tweet I saw that said, with some exception for us, since Agnes Callard has been a guest, but the tweet said, everything I've ever learned about Agnes Callard has been against my will.
Yeah. We cannot say that, to be fair.
No, we can't.
Invited her.
That's why I said with exception.
Yeah. I still respect her immunity to internet. Everybody's reacting to this and the cringiness of it, and she does not give a shit. And that's the key. That is the secret sauce, the cure, the cheat code, whatever.
Yeah.
It is the way to just get the internet to move on almost right away. People who want to pile on and who really want to start some sort of thing, and they just are immediately diffused and disempowered. Perhaps like her husband's.
Yeah, it is a superpower of sorts, both to get people to care about your weird drama and also to not give a shit when they respond negatively about it. It's like some combination of stoicism and, I don't want to say narcissism, but I'm going to say it.
It just washes off of her.
Yeah, but I'm talking about why do it? I would never, ever want a New Yorker profile written up about my personal life like that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that fun?
Yeah, I don't know. She is, as she talks about, on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And she's just oh, this is cool. Probably, I don't know how was she contacted by?
That's what I don't understand. It was like an embedded journalist. She's talking about having pita and hummus with her husbands.
Multiple days. The pita is a big thing or at least, but you're right. I didn't even think of this, but I think at some point she's making pita in the evening, and then the next day there's also something with that pita or new pita. What I never thought of until now is, was she just staying at her house? Was the Rachel Avi?
I don't understand how these things work. You tell me how the inner machinations of elite liberal press work.
For you to say that when I'm down here, I've been living in the South for essentially the last 20 years.
Well, this wasn't our opening segment.
All right. Yes. What is our opening segment? It's been a while, but we have come back to one of these idiotic neuroscience articles with just the perfect title for one of these. Maybe the platonic form of the title for this kind of article. Blame the brain, not Bolsonaro, for Brazil's riots. It's by political science professor Matt Kvortrup.
Okay, so you sent me this. I am still not convinced that this is a real person and that this is a real article. It's that crazy it reads like it was written in 2003.
Right.
And I just can't believe that anybody's making these arguments.
No.
Why do people take part in insurrections like the January 6, 2021 attacks on the U.S. Capitol, the storming of the presidential residence in Sri Lanka, or January's sacking of Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace in Brazil? Sometimes that question is answered by pointing to precipitating events, elections and their results, protests that descended to anger, or the speeches of powerful demagogues. On other occasions, we blame insurrections on prejudices or bigotries, racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, white nationalism. I suggest that we think about insurrections differently because they originate in our brains.
just perfect idiocy. Like, did we think the powerful demagogues didn't have brains?
Sometimes when I talk about neuroscience, like this kind of thing, I think to myself, you're getting close to straw manning what these people say.
I know.
And then you read something like this and you're like, oh, no subtlety. Just like you thought it was people's actions, but it's actually their brains. And yes, okay. From a rational point of view, rebellions seem pointless. A political scientist even coined the phrase, the paradox of revolution. Enter neuroscience.
Yeah.
Enter neuroscience is a whole paragraph.
It's its own paragraph. So the contrasting explanations, as he sets it up, are relative deprivation. Actually, that's just it. The reason was poverty or, quote, relative deprivation. It's either that or it's your brain.
Or it's your brain.
I love how he says that they used all these sophisticated mathematical models to try to explain rebellion and revolt, and they just couldn't do it until, hold on, enter neuroscience.
Yeah, it was irrational. And we thought all along that this must be rational.
We were flummoxed.
And then he proceeds to kind of just talk about studies that are just some of the things he says about the brain just sound like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like when he's talking about the limbic system, he's talking about stuff that neuroscientists would never say now.
And I feel like you said, for the last 10 years that they would.
Yeah.
So let me read it a little bit more. Since the early 2000s, we have been able to look at what happens inside our heads when we think, using fMRI scans which measure changing blood flow to brain cells. This is such early 2005. We can now see which parts of the brain get activated when we engage in various activities like shopping, thinking about sex, and feeling remorse. This perspective has also entered into the realm of political analysis, finally putting the science in political science.
Oh my God, I would be so mad if I were a political scientist. Finally.
They deserve what they get too, because all their bullshit models are equally just fraudulent. But I will say, yes, I agree. I felt for the first time and probably the only time defensive of it.
So you think, all right, is the upshot that because it's the brain that we therefore either can't control it or we have to do direct neural interventions of some sort? No, his conclusion is as banal as anything anybody could say about what to do. So he says, this is at the end. Humans are the product of 8 million years of evolution. We have the capacity to use the powers with which we have been endowed, namely to learn by being attentive and through open deliberation. Human evolution hardwired us to process information and make progress through listening, Tamler, through listening. Mm-hmm. But when we engage in hate speech and angry rebellion, we revert to an evolutionarily primitive stage. Neuropolitics shows us a way out of the current polarized debate and into a better future.
Yeah.
So wait, what are we supposed to do? Talk?
We're just supposed to talk about policy.
And that's the big insight that fMRIs gave us.
No, but really, that's literally the argument of this column.
It's incredible.
Is that because of fMRI studies? Now, let's to use a term I actually hate, steelman this argument, right? So the idea is that some lizard brain region was activated when individuals, this now quoting, who are identified by psychological tests as radicals were exposed to hate speech statements or other intolerant assertions about other groups or minorities. And then he says that the fact that this ventral striatum was activated is remarkable because it's the oldest part of the brain and it's linked to a fight and flight center. And then this is the key quote, the most interesting part of this body of research, generally brains respond differently to politics than to policies. Scans show that when people think about politics, as in the rough and tumble partisan struggle, the fight and flight amygdala, is just back to the amygdala, it's all, gets activated. But when people are exposed to questions about policy, they use the more advanced parts of the brain. In fMRI studies dating as far back as 2009, scientists found that the dorsolateral frontal cortex lit up, like lit up in people exposed to arguments about economic policy. Like, what is that? The boredom center? Like
Exactly. Two things those findings are showing. The latter one that you just talked about is when people are asked about progressive tax policies, they're bored as shit. But if you show Democrats Tucker Carlson clips, then they get mad.
Yeah.
That's the insight.
Which you need to have brain research to really determine that, to discover that.
The ventral striatum stuff is just like involved in reward. So basically saying when you show hateful people stuff that they like, the brain shows that they like it. Yeah, like a racist person likes racist shit. The whole lizard brain thing, this guy, it can't be a serious, I don't know.
I think there's two ways that some of these neuroscience pieces are fundamentally misguided. One is that they do the thing like the headline does, where it's not Bolsonaro's fault, it's the brain's fault, as if like Bolsonaro doesn't have a brain.
Right.
That's just mind-boggling to me. I find it to be actually like a deep mystery why intelligent people, I'm not saying this guy is, but I'm saying other intelligent people can sometimes fall for that conflation in a way that, or lack of conflation, in a way that is, I don't understand it. There's something missing in their otherwise intelligent, like cognitive world. But the second thing is they vastly oversimplify like what these regions and the various activations say. And this is the part that like I think I was surprised to see in 2023, because you really don't find much of that anymore. You still find the people saying, oh, blame your brain, don't blame.
You know, when my daughter was little, I used to like poke her and then she'd say, stop it. And I'd say, it wasn't me, it was my arm. Mm-hmm. Even she's smart enough to know that was a bullshit claim. Don't blame the insurrection on the brains, blame it on the rocks that they were throwing.
Okay, here's a question. I don't know if this is even worth asking, but I'm trying to think if there's any way this kind of argument could be not ludicrous. So what if, the part of our brain that we really don't have control over in terms of, like, I sound stupid, like I'm just saying this makes me, but like, there's certain things where our volition seems to be weak or non-existent. And let's say, like, I'm sure this isn't true, but let's just say behaviorally, when we're low in volition, this part of the brain lights up. And let's say this part of the brain lights up when you start seeing like highly polarized culture war debate. Now, you might think that participating in that was voluntary because people seem to choose to do it all the time. But would this tell you that maybe it's less voluntary than you thought it was?
Oh, man. There's so much that I'd want to know about what is going on with the low volition conditions. Like, is it something like, when you're sleepwalking? Or when you have like alien hand syndrome and one hand is like going crazy.
Right.
Because the emotion stuff, it's just like, well, now it's just arguments that lead in the end to doubting that anything really is under volitional control. Like, but I genuinely don't think that the brain can tell us what is under volitional control and what isn't.
Right. So initially, it would have just been because of correlations with behavioral studies, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to figure out if, like, even in principle, like, so the idea is initially they matched the lack of volition to these brain states. And then we're surprised, like he says, like it's
Right.
remarkable that the ventral striatum was activated, because that's usually associated with this less voluntary. You see what I'm saying? Like, is
Yeah.
the structure here something that could possibly work? Because I think not, but I'm not sure I'm right about that. It's possible that in principle, something like this could.
We were like, well, we thought you were deliberating, but in fact, your brain is acting like the brain of
Yeah.
a hypnotized person, even though you appear to be acting sort of voluntarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of our conversation with Sam Harris that we titled Tumors All the Way Down and we had the case of the guy whose tumor was acting on his brain.
Mhm. But he didn't recognize that.
And in that case, it is a little tricky because his actions appeared voluntary. So this kind of analysis to say, like, is this person acting voluntarily or not? I really don't think that there's anything in the brain. I guess it depends if you mean involuntary in the sense that we should reduce our blame for these kinds of actions. Is he mounting a defense of, being more lenient on
The
these
January
people?
6th people.
Yeah, but it's not. It's like, let's talk to them.
But let's talk to them about, like the Build Back Better plan.
This argument that he ends with seems to undermine any of that voluntariness stuff, because it's like, well, if you can just talk, if what you're saying is just like talk to these people,
Right.
then they seem reasons responsive. So it wasn't like some reflex, some like lizard brain knee-jerk reaction, or at least it's a kind of reaction that can be overridden by deliberation. And in that case, I would say, well, then you should have overridden it before you did it or something like that,
No. But to be clear, the blame stuff, I think, is its own question. I'm saying, like, could it actually get you to cure a bad habit or, at a societal level, improve the state of discourse? Could, in principle, an fMRI set of studies, neuroscientific research, actually help for that? Could it, in principle, tell us anything more than behavioral studies and self-report studies tell us? Like, could it add anything to that?
I have a ton of neuroscience colleagues who always get pissed off at me for all of the things that we say on this podcast, but I'm going to double down.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't think so. So it's like neuromarketing, which was popular for a while, which was like, oh, look, when you show people fizzly Coke on the screen, their reward centers light up. And so, okay, that makes sense. But is that something that you couldn't have learned by just showing them that stuff and seeing if they want to drink it?
Yeah. And they want to buy it?
Yeah, and they want to buy it. There have to be examples that make me wrong about this. But for the life of me, I don't know what it would mean to show that this particular part of the brain, unless you were talking some real low level shit, some real like brainstem stuff was going on that like made me slap you.
It's not about responsibility. It's just about adding anything, adding something that would, let's say, instrumentally, whether it's getting people to buy Sprite or getting people to move beyond the polarized state of our political discussion.
Okay, here, I'll play. In principle, I think that if you found, and it would have to be at a much more detailed level of analysis than this guy is talking, but suppose that you found that there is a particular neurotransmitter working in a particular network that actually causes people to be hateful. So, or that is heavily implicated. And you say, everybody who is like deeply racist has like super increased activity in this network that is sensitive to these neurotransmitters. You could, I think, develop a drug that targeted that. And maybe
I didn't know
in the
you were
hopes
gonna take
in the
it.
hopes of reducing that. This is all like just totally in principle. But I don't think if you're talking at the level of analysis of like what to do for like public service announcement stuff, it's such a different level of analysis, I think, that
Yeah.
it just doesn't make that much sense.
If it was something you started to consider as like a medical condition, you could
Yeah.
design a drug. But if you could design a drug, why can't you just design a way of speaking or a way of interacting?
I mean, it's essentially that's what therapy does, right? So we know the whole serotonin hypothesis about depression has come under scrutiny, but suppose that that's true, that in some simplistic way, depression is a depletion of serotonin. And we know that therapy works on it. So it must work by increasing serotonin levels. And also drugs work that way. It's just
Yeah.
that I don't think we needed to learn that to know that therapy worked, right? That just was like a happenstance discovery after the fact.
Right.
Because it must work some way.
There's got to be some kind of brain and body-based way that it
Yeah.
works, because otherwise you're a Cartesian dualist. But
Right.
there is something interesting. Like when you said the thing about the drug, I was like, oh yeah, that could help. And something in me,
Yeah.
not the limbic system, but that other one, the good one, the good part, the good advanced recent.
It's just devils and angels. Like, which part of your brain is the devil on your shoulder?
Yeah.
And which one?
This is the Kant area, the Kantian area of my brain lit up. But like, it does seem more plausible in the case of a drug than in the case of just adjusting social interaction. But
Yeah.
am I suffering at that level then from the same delusion, or is there a principled reason why it's more plausible in the case of a drug? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there is this way in which a drug can bypass the normal inputs. Like, so suppose that you did something just really kind for me and that filled me with some warm, like, gratitude and appreciation and love for you. Or I just took ecstasy and I was like, that bypassed all of the normal ways in which that system would get activated. Or I take cocaine, right? And I just go straight to the reward system. I think that drugs and whatever other brain manipulating things that we can invent could just radically alter behavior.
Right. And the way the neuroscience would help at that is you would study how you felt. Like, all of this is fantasy at this level of technology that we had. But you would study your brain when I did something really nice for you.
Yeah.
And then you would design a drug that could try to activate those same parts of the brain. Now, if you're then talking about behaviorally, well, I already know that we can make you feel good by giving you stuff, because that's what led us to make this connection in the first place. And so I don't need the brain to tell me. In fact, it seems completely irrelevant. Do more of this kind of thing because it makes him feel happy. Because the whole reason that they even know that in the first place in the brain studies are because you report it.
Right. And now we're into like some soma territory, where the government will eventually control us by putting certain drugs in our water. And
if it hasn't already.
I mean, it made frogs gay.
You don't mean French people, you mean.
No, there was like a while back, like in some very conservative circles, I mean, it might have been an Alex Jones thing, that like there was chemicals in the water that turned frogs gay. And then he thought, this is why the gays were all of a sudden everywhere.
They made crickets want to do drag shows for children.
And so I'm glad you made me think a little bit more deeply about this. If a doctor said, Tamler, there's this new drug that we've discovered will make you argue less with your wife and have just a happier marriage. Like, nothing in your life will materially change. It's just that you won't argue with your wife anymore. Would you take it?
You had me at new drug.
It's because she's on the drug already.
If she has been hitting me less, actually.
That's a different question altogether. I would definitely give it to my partner. Just
You would slip it into like,
so that way I'm not risking any monkey paw scenario for myself.
yeah. You have a long history of slipping things in women's drinks too. So.
Oh, that's terrible. No.
Which part of your brain lit up when I said that?
The Bill Cosby part.
The Bill Cosby region. So we never even said what we're talking about today, but we are talking about a paper from 1971 by Jeffrie Murphy called Marxism and Retribution. It has a healthy dollop of Kant and a healthy dollop of Marx. So something for both of us.
And not at all, by the way, unrelated to the beginning. Yeah.
No, exactly. I didn't want to make the connection because nobody would understand what we were referring to, but I had the same thought exactly. All right. We'll be right back to talk about Marxism and Retribution.
This episode of Very Bad Wizards is brought to you again by BetterHelp Online Therapy. You know, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you've probably gotten the sense that we believe that there are various ways in which you can improve your life, various ways in which you can acquire insight into yourself, into your relationships, into the human condition. For instance, consuming art, watching a great movie, reading a great novel. But there are other ways, like developing honest relationships with others who might be able to tell you things that you don't want to hear. And therapy is just that. I think one of the great insights of 20th century psychology is that therapy can help anybody no matter what stage or what issues they're having in their lives. And it's never been easier to get therapy, to go see a therapist. You can try BetterHelp online therapy if you want to get that process started. BetterHelp will connect you to a licensed professional therapist in under 48 hours. All you have to do is go to their website, fill out a brief questionnaire, and they'll match you with a therapist. You can change that therapist if you don't like them at no additional cost to you. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. So if you're at all at the stage of your life where you're considering trying out therapy, why not give BetterHelp online therapy a try? Just go to betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com/VBW today to get 10% off of your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/VBW. Our thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode of Very Bad Wizards. Welcome back to Very Bad Wizards. This is the time of the episode where we like to take a moment to thank everybody for all of their support. We really appreciate it. And Tamler, man, there's just been maybe it's Piranesi, the episode that brought out people's nice emotions, but we've gotten so many nice emails from people that like, I can't tell you how much like they meant to me.
Yeah, it does seem like maybe it brought out people's generosity of spirit.
Yeah, I feel like that too. Yeah.
Modeled on Piranesi, the character.
And you know why? It's because we tickled that part of their brain.
Yeah, exactly.
If you
the Piranesi
module. If you want to email us, we love to hear from you. You can email us verybadwizards@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at Tamler or at Peas or at verybadwizards. If you want to join with fellow listeners in discussions on Reddit, you can go to reddit.com/r/verybadwizards. And you can follow us on Instagram, see our new episodes posted. And we very much also appreciate it if you rate us on Apple Podcasts or subscribe on Spotify, just to help us get seen and discovered. And I'll say it for Tamler, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate all that. So thank you for getting in touch with us. Thank you for supporting us.
Yeah, thank you. And if you'd like to support us in more tangible ways, there's a bunch of ways you can do that, all of which are on our support page, verybadwizards.com/support. You can buy some swag. You can give us a one-time or recurring PayPal donation. Or you can become one of our Patreon supporters, beloved Patreon supporters of the house, of the pod. We have a lot going on Patreon. So for $1 per episode, so it's essentially $2 a month, you get all ad-free episodes and 6 volumes of Dave's Beats. At $2 and up per episode, you get all of that plus our bonus episodes. And we have a huge archive at this point of bonus content. And all of it is not, tied to the date in any way. Right. So included in that are monthly Ask Us Anythings, which I'll come back to. And also our Ambulators series, which is one of our favorite things that we've ever done is a detailed recap of every Deadwood episode, and we have finished with the first season. We're itching to get started on the second season.
There's very few things in terms of like work stuff or anything like that excites me. Like I just look forward to the next Ambulator.
And starting now, you also get early access, and I'm saying this through gritted teeth, and my lizard brain fight or flight amygdala right now is just lighting up like a Christmas tree. But you will also get early access to Dave Pizarro's new podcast with Paul Bloom called Psych, which is a limited, if I'm to understand correctly, series.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's based on, thank you. Tamler was saying it through much love too. Gritted teeth and love. It's love is a motherfucker. It's a 16 episode run we're going to do of Paul and I talking about intro psych stuff. It was inspired by the fact that he has a book called Psych coming out. That's just intro psych stuff. And we're putting it out, and we're giving our dear patrons early access to each episode.
Yeah, I think if you like Paul, and chances are you do.
Yeah.
And
it's very different, a lot less cursing than this.
Really? Is it supposed to be not explicit? Or
it's not explicit. Because one of the things I really wanted to do was just have like a set of these episodes where I could say to my intro psych students, like, if you want to hear more about these topics, like, listen to this. And my hope is that other professors might care enough. So Paul was actually insistent. And the first time we recorded, I said shit. And at the end, he's like, you said shit. All right. Sorry, Paul. Bleep it out.
All right. So I'm a little less worried about this.
It's very different.
You just running off together and leaving me behind.
If anything, we would bring you to live together with us.
Yeah, that's where this is heading. I can tell. And maybe I don't know if you're listening to this, Rachel Aviv, but you might want to write about that. Maybe a whole double issue of the New Yorker devoted just to that story. That's very exciting, and obviously Paul is the beloved guest of the pod. So I'm happy that you're doing that. At $5 and up, you will get access, in addition to all of what we just said, our Brothers Karamazov series, 5 episodes on the Brothers Karamazov. That's also one of our favorite things we've ever done. You will get to see how many, like 10, 12 videos of your intro psych lectures that you recorded during COVID, very professionally done, and a couple of lectures I gave on Plato's Symposium that are not professionally done. And you will also get to vote on an episode topic. We do that twice a year. We allow our $5 and up listeners to vote on an episode topic that we choose from finalists that all of our patrons can suggest. Finally, at the $10 and up per episode tier, you get to every month ask us questions, and 99.9% of the time we will answer that question in a monthly video that we release to you. And we really enjoy those. I'm excited to do another one of those as well. So, and then, like I said earlier, we also release the audio version of that to our to the $2 and up tier. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. We're blown away, and everyone always says, like, I'm humbled by the amount of support, and it always sounds like just arrogant bullshit, but I kind of get it when I think about our patrons,
Yeah, totally.
It's really nice. All right, let's get to our paper, our article. I would argue could belong in our classic paper series. It's not maybe as well known as some of the other ones, but it is a classic.
I mean, it's old enough to be a classic. I didn't know anything about it. I don't even know anything about the author, to be honest.
Yeah. Jeffrie Murphy is his name. Definitely somebody who is known in philosophy of punishment circles. Professor at Arizona State. Done a lot of good stuff in this area. This is one of his earliest papers, published in Philosophy of Public Affairs, called Marxism and Retribution. I've taught this in my philosophy of punishment class for years, and I always really admired it, liked it, thought it was important, in spite of the affinities with Kant that Murphy has.
Surprising.
I know. So just to briefly summarize what's going on in the paper, Murphy starts out offering a somewhat question-begging Kantian critique of utilitarianism. And one thing that he notes is that everyone focuses on the problem that utilitarianism could maybe justify punishing the innocent, but Murphy says what needs to get more attention is that they also can't really justify punishing guilty people, because utilitarians can't answer the question of what right we have to inflict suffering on people in order just to promote better consequences. So quoting Marx, he says, "What right have you to punish me for the amelioration or intimidation of others?" Because that is the justification that utilitarians often give for punishment, is deterrence and maybe rehabilitation, right? So according to Murphy, the fatal problem with utilitarianism is that it can't draw a distinction between what it would be good to do and what we have a right to do. And he says any theory that can't make sense of that distinction between what's good to do and what we have a right to do is morally degenerate. And actually, surprisingly to me anyway, he claims Marx as an ally when it comes to this view and quotes a couple things. But then comes the twist. While Murphy believes that retributivism is the only morally defensible theory in principle, he argues that it's indefensible in practice in a capitalist society like our own. The reasons why, well, first, the theory relies on false empirical assumptions about social conditions and human relations. And second, and this is really interesting, it treats certain concepts and gives analyses of certain concepts like rationality as necessary truths when in fact they reflect historical contingencies. In other words, the way we understand a concept like rationality is an artifact of living in a modern capitalist system, and it's not the truth about what is rational and what isn't. So in practice, even though retributivism is a morally correct theory in principle, in practice it turns out to just offer a transcendental sanction for the status quo, a way to kind of justify the ruling class staying in power. And as a result, Murphy concludes that modern societies largely lack the right to punish people at all, because utilitarianism is a dead end and retributivism, for different reasons, turns out to be a dead end. And so we don't have the right to punish people and would have to transform society in order to get that right. Now, I want to go through the arguments here in some depth, but I'll stop this summary just to ask you what you thought of the paper, because obviously you're going to splooge all over the Kantianism in it. But you're also a libertarian Hayekian zealot, so the Marx can't have gone down too well. So which side wins?
That's a good question. So I enjoyed the paper, although I do find that my objections lie mostly, as you predicted, on the Marxist arguments, which we'll get to. I enjoyed it because I was very surprised that there would be a Kantian Marxist. Like, it's just weird. It is very weird. Like, anybody who I've ever talked to, and that's granted not a lot of people, about stuff like this, is like Marxism and utilitarianism feel like they belong together a bit more than Kantianism. I don't think that I find that utilitarianism and Marxism like are coherent as two. It's more the people who tend to be Marxists that I know.
Vlad, essentially.
Maybe you're right. Maybe, but I don't even think does Marx talk that much about rights?
That's what surprised me. I mean, there's a clear link between Kant and Hegel, and then Hegel and Marx.
Right.
So in that sense, it makes sense that, they would have that kind of German idealism connection. And even though Marx rejected the idealism of Hegel, like, he's clearly buying into some part of that project. But yeah, I was surprised because we'll get to this when we talk about the arguments in the paper, but I would have thought that a lot of this stuff about respecting individual rights, which has its roots in kind of Locke, and that Marx would think that's also offering a transcendental sanction for the status quo. Right? You know what I mean? That he wouldn't consider it to be necessary for any morally defensible theory to respect individual rights, because that's just liberal Enlightenment bullshit to keep people from having to give up their property.
Right. So yeah, maybe my source of sort of the jarring experience comes from the rights talk being so associated with libertarianism, which is so opposite of Marxism. Yeah. And so,
and I don't know, I don't, the little Marx that I've read doesn't focus that much on Marx. So we almost have to take Murphy at his word that Marx has this concern, but also it doesn't really matter for the argument in the paper.
No, it sort of motivates that quote motivates the argument. I got the sense that this quote is one from Marx that Murphy, it just probably puzzled Murphy at first. And that's why he worked out this, because I think the quote is interesting because it doesn't seem like Marx talked about this that much.
Should we read the quote we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah.
From the point of view of abstract right, there is only one theory of punishment which recognizes human dignity in the abstract, and that is the theory of Kant, especially in the more rigid formula given to it by Hegel. Hegel says punishment is the right of the criminal, it is an act of his own will. This was the Hegelian theory of punishment, says that the criminal wills his own punishment. The violation of right has been proclaimed by the criminal as his own right. His crime is the negation of right. And then Marx says there's no doubt there's something specious in this formula, inasmuch as Hegel, instead of looking upon the criminal as the mere object, the slave of justice, elevates him to the position of a free and self-determined being. Looking more closely, however, at the matter, we see that German idealism here, as in other instances, has but given a transcendental sanctions to the rules of existing society. It's a delusion to substitute for the individual with his real motives and multifarious social circumstances the abstraction of free will. Nothing about this quote actually makes me think that Marx was that into rights. I mean, he qualifies. Right. He says from the point of view of abstract rights.
Right. He sort of, he sort of just then dismisses that, I think, the German idealism with this. Yeah.
But Murphy has Kantian affinities, and so whether or not Marx did as well is not relevant, I don't think, to anything that follows.
I honestly found myself maybe pushing against the Kantian view of punishment. I'm confused about all of this because I do have utilitarian leanings as well. So I don't really know what I believe. But this at least gave me some good fodder for trying to work out in my mind what the right view of punishment might be. And this we'll get to at the end. But at the end, I really wanted to say, so wait, what do we do?
Well, yeah, that is an issue that I also want to discuss when we get to the end of this paper. But let's just go through the argument a little bit. So the idea is, if you agree with the premise that any legitimate theory of punishment has to be able to make sense of how we can have a right to inflict suffering on another person. And what he says is, what is needed in order to reconcile my undesired suffering of punishment at the hands of the state, to reconcile that with my autonomy, is a political theory which makes the state's decision to punish me in some sense my own decision. So this is the Hegel view, to make sense of that. If I have willed my own punishment, consented to it, agreed to it, then even if at the time I happen not to desire it, it can be said that my autonomy and dignity remain intact, and general will theories and social contract theories try to reconcile these two things: autonomy with state authority, including whether the state has a right to punish or not. So then he goes through these kinds of general will, social contract theory. There's, I think, a scary dystopian Hegel view where it's you have your empirical self, which is what you say you want and what you actually express desire for, and then what you want according to reason. And that's your true will. Your true will is what reason dictates you should want. And your actual will, that's just, something that we can discard when we want to know what you truly will or desire.
Yeah. I like to this section on social contract and how Kant dealt with it. Like I did find it a bit fascinating because I just don't read this stuff. So the idea is, by participating in society, you know that your desires are going to be in conflict with the desires of others. And you understand that in order for like you to even be able to fulfill some of these desires, these wants, whatever, that you're going to need to live in a society where other people would not infringe upon your rights. And in doing that, maybe one view is that you're tacitly consenting to a state that's allowed to punish. So your will is, it's almost like the revealed preference of an economist. It says like, well, you just, obviously you understand that in order for you to get any shit done, you can't have other people fucking up your shit. And so you must agree. Some deep part of you must be agreeing that punishment is a thing that the state should do for people who violate those rights. So when you yourself commit a crime, you're in violation of the thing that you believed in some deep sense.
And you're implicitly willing then that you be punished for
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Right. Even if you're saying no, like,
Yeah.
that, you know, according to these social contract people, of course you're going to say no at the time. Like who would want to be punished in the moment? But
Right.
yeah.
Right. It's like when you're punishing a kid
Yeah.
and you say, you did this you made the choice to do this, to ground yourself. You're not saying like you actually want to be grounded for a month. You're saying you did a thing that you knew could lead to this and was in violation of the rules that you also agreed to and consented to.
Right.
Yeah, this is the problem. And Murphy recognizes that it's a problem. He says, now this idea of treating people not as in fact they say they want to be treated, but rather in terms of how you think they would if rational, will to be treated, has obviously dangerous, indeed fascistic implications.
Yeah.
Surely we want to avoid cramming indignities down the throats of people with the offhand observation that no matter how much they scream, they are rationally willing every bit of it. It would be particularly ironic for such arbitrary repression to come under the mask of respecting autonomy. And that's always been the most, well, not the most offensive thing about this view, but that this idea that we're actually expanding your freedom. This is like what Isaiah Berlin in the Positive and Negative Liberty paper that we discussed a long time ago was also worried about with Hegel and and actually I think Marx or Marxists.
There is a quote from Kant that I really actually loved that is laying out his social contract view. Where he says, the problem of organizing a state, however hard it may seem, can be solved even for a race of devils, if only they are intelligent. The problem is, given a multiple of rational beings requiring universal laws for their preservation, but each of whom is secretly inclined to exempt himself from them, to establish a constitution in such a way that although their private intentions conflict, they check each other with the result that their public conduct is the same as if they had no such intentions.
Yeah.
And I like it because it presents the problem nicely. Like this is a kind of a like a game theory problem, even though Kant would never have said it that way.
Yeah, but game theory operates with certain assumptions, and I'm glad you read that passage because that's exactly going to be a central part of the critique. I think one of the more forceful parts of the critique is at using that conception of rationality, of a bunch of self-interested devils trying to come up with a contract that will maximize each of their self-interests, you know?
Yeah, right.
But then he says, but there's this other way that they try to justify it that you know, isn't as obviously chilling and dystopian, which is the Rawlsian approach of imagining an original position where people under a veil of ignorance have to decide, you know, if you're an individual in there, you don't know anything about like whether you're going to be born in a bad neighborhood, good neighborhood, anything about like a lot of money, no money, prone to violence, not prone to violence. You don't know any of that. What institution of punishment would you choose? And this is a retributive justification of punishment. They say you would choose retributive institutions over all the other institutions because it allows you to control your own fate in a way that utilitarianism or like a therapeutic approach to punishment does not. That's another way that's maybe not as crude This was the Rawlsian.
It's his tweak on the German idealism, social contract stuff.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, I guess it's an improvement in a way, although I think one of the most interesting objections that Murphy raises is on exactly that.
And I don't even know that it was that much of an improvement on what Kant was saying. I think he was just trying to offer some more legs on which to support that basic claim that he's like, no, it's almost like Rawls is saying, no, but really, like, okay, if you don't just want to believe what Kant said, imagine this. Giving a method to people, like he's like, no, I found an intuitive method where if you weren't prone to believing Kantian views, like now you will, because imagine this. But yes, then
again, transcendental sanction of the status quo, which is so okay. So then the next part of the argument goes like this: given that some combination of a Rawls Kant version of consent, you could have in principle, morally justified system of punishment, which utilitarianism can't provide because it doesn't make the crucial distinction between good to do and right to do. But here was an insight from Marx that not enough philosophers have internalized, have taken in, which is that theories can be formally correct, which means true in some possible world, but also be materially incorrect or materially inadequate, because which means not true in our actual world. And there's two ways that this can happen. Number one, that the theories in moral or political philosophy could presuppose certain empirical propositions about man and society, but those propositions turn out to be false. So then even if it was coherent or formally correct, it would be practically inapplicable. And then second, philosophical theories could put forth as a necessary truth that which is in fact merely an historically conditioned contingency. And the example he uses is kind of interesting. For example, Hobbes argued that all men are necessarily selfish and competitive, but it's possible that Hobbes was really doing nothing more than elevating to the status of a necessary truth the contingent fact that people around him in a capitalistic society were in fact selfish and competitive. So those are the two ways you could have a theory that formally works, but in practice is completely inapplicable. This is what he will argue about retributivism. It actually runs afoul of both of those things. It makes false empirical assumptions, and it also takes a concept like rationality and gives an analysis of it that seems like it would be just the only way to understand rationality, but in fact is a product of living in a Western capitalist society, to view rationality that way.
Yeah. Which he never offers a defense of why he believes that. But
I completely disagree. I find that to be like the most compelling part of it.
Because you're convinced, or because you think that he actually fleshed out why this is
the latter.
Yeah,
we'll go through it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Then he goes into, I guess, Wilhelm Bonger, who is a Marxist criminologist from the early 20th century. And, definitely at the risk of oversimplifying, which he is willing to do just to get the argument out, is to posit in a Marxist way that criminality has two main sources. Number one, need and deprivation on the part of the disadvantaged members of society. So if you're impoverished and you don't have access to money or opportunity, you will turn to crime. And number two, motives of greed and selfishness that are generated and reinforced in competitive capitalist economies. So this is definitely a big part of Marx's view that the economic structure of society actually shapes our personality, shapes our dispositions, desires, how we relate to one another. And capitalism brings out the most selfish part of us, the greediest part of us, the most individualistic parts of us, and the most competitive parts of us. Those two things together are the sources of at least the lion's share of criminality. And he says, look, you might think this is just Marxist bullshit like you probably do, but consider the fact that the vast majority of people in prison are poor. And, he's not bringing race into it, although he does at a couple points bring that into it. But certainly you could also add that element to this. The statistics around socioeconomic status and also race are it's so overwhelmingly disproportionate for the poor and Black people to be in prison that you would have to have some uber Charles Murrayist view of let me put it a different way. So that you would have to really think that the same things that made them turn to criminality also made them, or also are the reasons they became impoverished. And that's just unsustainable. That's not a defensible view when you look at our, the vast inequality in life and education and resources, neighborhood to neighborhood. So he thinks because of that, this view, oversimplified as it is, the Bonger view, we might disagree on how plausible it is, how much of crime it can explain, but it certainly explains a lot of it. And I think that's all Murphy needs to then mount this attack on retributivism as a theory of punishment.
Yeah, and he qualified his critique earlier by saying, I think it's that this retributivism is largely inapplicable within these societies. And he footnotes and says, I qualify my thesis by the word largely to show at this point my realization, explored in more detail later, that no single theory can account for all of criminal behavior. So he is trying to make like a largely claim, but it does lead me to wonder what he thinks in what other cases he might possibly conceive of where it doesn't capture criminality. And then if so, what is it that makes those cases different?
Well, I mean, like he does, like he gives an example of someone doing like tax fraud, like a rich person doing tax fraud. And he's like, for a person,
right. But
for a person like that, but the retributive theory could work. But like,
right. But he says, it could be that rich people are committing just as much crime. But that doesn't undermine what I'm saying, because rich people committing crime also could have this cause that capitalism has made them commit the crime. Right. And so he wants to have swallow all of crime under this materialist Marxist view of what's causing the crime, which does lead me to believe okay, so a rich person just decides to fuck over somebody. You're saying that this shouldn't be punished because this also has the cause that capitalism gave rise to the conditions that made this rich, greedy capitalist screw over poor people. So we can't punish that person. It does feel like all that. Here's my general feeling. I feel like Murphy is wanting to really defend a theory of determinism that undermines responsibility. That's really what's doing the work here. That he thinks that crime has its causes in something that's outside of the will of the people.
So I don't think so, actually, because when you look at the specific elements of the critique of retributivism, it's not about the fact that it was determined, but rather if you're just a compatibilist or even a libertarian who acknowledges that we have influences on our behavior. But I also see what you're saying, and especially something like motives of greed and selfishness and competitiveness, like that could inspire Bernie Madoff to do his Ponzi scheme just as much as it could lead a poor person to crime because of bad education and need.
Yeah,
they
and
need
so here's
money.
Here's where I wanted to ask you what you thought of this. So let's say that the conditions of capitalist society lead Bernie Madoff to do what he does, just like they lead poor people. Now, I'm not saying you're accepting that. It could just be that, Murphy says, well, fuck it, I didn't mean the rich people. Let's just focus on the poor people, which I think would be fine. But let's say that you do take seriously that capitalism might taint the capitalists, the greedy ones, and cause them to commit crime. It seems to me that I would, maybe this is just because I want to endorse some kind of Straussonian account of why they should still, why my reactive attitudes should not be suspended for the rich people.
But it's not about reactive attitudes. Like it's about inflicting punishment and suffering on people, putting them
But I'd think that they'd meet all the criteria for blameworthiness. So here's where I'm tying these together. It feels as if Bernie Madoff meets the criteria for blameworthiness on say a Straussonian account. If he does, and he was still influenced by capitalism to commit that crime, then why couldn't a poor person who decides to commit a crime also meet those? Like, I feel like you would need something in addition to the economic analysis.
To answer that, I think we need to go a little bit more into the details of the critique, the different ways, because I actually think retributivists aren't employing a Straussonian approach in their defense of the theory. So at the very least, right, like this critique would apply to the ways in which retributivists have justified their theory of punishment. So let me just go through two of the ways that he thinks it undermines the specific details of the retributive theories. One of them is this idea that you alluded to earlier, that people just by living in a society consent to certain rules, and those rules involve punishing people who infringe on other people's rights. And so just our staying in the society is implied consent to being punished if we break the law. And he says, look, people can't, like, them living, and especially if you are low on the socioeconomic status, but you don't even have to be that low on the socioeconomic scale, you can't move to another country. You can't move to a different society. Like, you have no way of surviving if you did that. And so you're just staying in the society doesn't imply consent to anything except that you're just trying to live.
Yeah, there's no opt-out. And with no opt-out, then it seems like that argument loses force.
And I think that would be true whether it was a capitalist society or not. It's not like people have, in different economic structures have been able to have full mobility.
This episode of Very Bad Wizards is brought to you by the podcast Rethinking from the TED Audio Collective, which is hosted by Adam Grant. Adam is a respected scholar. He's a professor of organizational psychology at Wharton School of Business. He's written a number of books, all that apply behavioral science research to your life. And he's just an interesting, intelligent, thoughtful guy. In this podcast, what he does is he interviews great people, great minds to see what assumptions they challenge, to see what we can learn from them to become our best selves. Previous guests include people like Reese Witherspoon, Dolly Parton, Mark Cuban, and many more. So if you're interested at all in this topic, in hearing an intelligent person interview people who have really made an impact on the world, you may very well be interested in the Rethinking podcast. Again, it's from the TED Audio Collective, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. Our thanks to the Rethinking podcast for sponsoring this episode of Very Bad Wizards.
The second way in which retributivists sometimes justify, and here he's referring to like Herbert Morris and this view that we all get benefits and burdens from living in a society. And one of the burdens that we all take on ourselves is to follow the rules and not try to take advantage of other people. So if we decide to commit a crime, take advantage of another person, then there is a burden that everyone else has to fairly shoulder that we don't, and we get an extra benefit at the expense of somebody else. Punishment is taking away that benefit that we got from ourselves by not shouldering the burdens that everybody else has to. And here's where like inequality and what was true in 1971 is even more true today, that the idea that we're all roughly distributed with benefits and burdens is a complete joke. And so he says, consider an example. A man has been convicted of armed robbery. On investigation, we learned that he is an impoverished black. Who's an impoverished black person, we'll say, whose whole life has been one of frustrating alienation from the prevailing socioeconomic structure, no job, no transportation. If he could get a job, substandard education for his children, terrible housing, inadequate health care for his whole family, condescending, tardy, inadequate welfare payments, harassment by the police, but no protection by them against the dangers in his community, and near total exclusion from the political process. Learning all of this, would we still want to talk as as many do, of his suffering punishment under the rubric of paying a debt to society? Surely not. Debt for what? I do not think that all criminals can be so described, but I do think that this is a closer picture of the typical criminal than the picture that is presupposed in the retributive theory, the picture of an evil person who, of his own free will, intentionally acts against the just rules of society, which he knows, as a rational man, benefit everyone, including himself. That's the gentleman's club view of society. And this is the thing that's just empirically false under capitalism, according to Murphy.
By the way, I don't think that that's I think that he's being a little bit strawman-y here. And so he's giving the real easy example of that, everybody's going to agree, oh, that poor guy doesn't deserve, and then he has these extraordinary strict conditions that he thinks retributivism has to adhere to. But retributivism just requires that you be blameworthy. And then that, it could be that on some Kantian view of free will, you have to meet all of those conditions, but retributivism doesn't require those are the conditions under which you made all your decisions. And that's what I was getting at with my discussion earlier of compatibilism. It's not that I was saying the retributivists or idealists are compatibilists. I was just saying retributivism just requires some view of blameworthiness.
But I think that's not true when it comes to punishment. At least at the specific theories that he's specifically targeting involve this notion of consent. And these maybe the more rationalist defenses of retributivism is what he's targeting. And you are seem to be saying that a more sentimentalist defense of retributivism can survive this critique, and maybe it can, but that's not what he's attacking. He is attacking the rationalist defenses, which involve respecting autonomy and not inflicting suffering against somebody's will.
And maybe that's what I'm just not that clear on as to how these theories of punishment are related to theories of blame. Because it is interesting. This is attacking it doesn't seem to be attacking the blameworthiness part. It seems to be attacking the right of the punisher part.
Right. Exactly.
But the right of the punisher seems to depend on some notion that the agent that committed the crime deserves to be punished.
It's more than that, though. It's not, the deserve is in the reason they deserve punishment is that they, in some sense, willed their own punishment.
So maybe then if he's saying retributivism that is motivated by some form of Kantian or Rawlsian notion cannot stand, and he's limiting it to that, then it makes more sense, because I feel like there are other versions of retributivism as a theory of punishment that could just be limited to just saying the state has the right to punish anybody who deserves that punishment. And you don't need to have arrived at your judgment of desert in a Kantian way. You can arrive at it in some other way. And then I feel like then now I have a theory of retributivism that might escape Murphy's critique.
I think you're right about that. And I think he's writing this in 1971, and what's all the rage is more those Kantian, that Herbert Morris paper, Persons and Punishment, was what jump-started this new wave of retributive theories in philosophy. And so I think he is specifically targeting that and Rawls and the Kant-Hegel view, which I think he's right about. I think what you're saying, that retributivism as a whole defended from this more sentimentalist kind of approach might not, I haven't even actually thought about that at length, but it might not be vulnerable to this kind of critique, although it also might, depending on how our reactive attitudes are, whether they're sensitive to certain things like deprivation
that's right. And
stress.
That's what I'm not, that's what is just, I think you're right that this is just historically, this is not a paper that could have tackled that. I do find, though, that Murphy's takedown of that social contract-y view is that it's good. And it just does seem absurd to talk about an idea that can be abused. What I'm fighting is that, like, okay, that idea can definitely be abused, that, that treating, well, no, you really wanted it, so therefore, like, let me incarcerate, a third of black men,
right.
or whatever. Utilitarian justifications can be really abused. Like, I think part of my resistance is, at the end, I don't have a theory that allows me to punish anybody.
Yeah.
And what I'm really curious about is, and this is maybe just a question about Marxism, is the belief really that non-capitalist societies wouldn't have that crime? Like, surely there's all kinds of societies that have existed ever. Have the crime rates really been, controlling for the size of the society? But, like, have the crime rates, don't people commit crimes of passion all the time?
I mean, they certainly don't. Like, not that much stuff. Like, we've been doing in the class, actually, for the first time, some of the Foucault stuff on punishment. And, what he says is that if you go back to, 1600s, like, punishment was much more like, it was much more violent and barbaric and much more public, but also much rarer. And little things that people did, like if you stole some carrots from some neighboring, estate or whatever, they would just let that go more often than not. They didn't have like this idea of criminalizing everything and setting everything down as some sort of rigid law, and that is kind of an invention of the Enlightenment period under the guise of being more humane in how you punish. What it actually did, it had the effect of two things. Number one, punishing more widely, so widening the scope of punishment, and also distributing the agency of punishment, because there, every so often there would be riots after these public tortures and executions of people, because they would have some sympathy, and so this, and they knew exactly who to riot against. It was the sovereign, and it was the executioners. So, I think it actually is an open question to, and even just a question of what we define as criminality is something that is pretty dependent on the kind of society that you live in.
Yeah. What I'm not sure of is, I totally agree with you about widening the scope of punishment. I guess what I really don't know is that a feature of like societies getting so large and complex, or is it specifically a feature of capitalism? And I guess I don't have the right comparison case. Like, I don't know what is there any large society that is not capitalist that we could compare and see, like, did they not widen the scope of punishment? Because, you were talking about like the brutality of punishment in like the 1600s. And I'm currently reading a book that's about that era. And a lot of it was punishment for, treason against, against the sovereign. Exactly. Right. So but any small act could be taken as treacherous, and they would just do these like drawn and quartered, like violent, gruesome things, and like have the heads of criminals just like, adorning the London Bridge. It was crazy. So it's the idea that like Soviet Russia was never like the appropriate comparison case, like, because they were explicitly non-capitalist, but was crime lower? Like,
I think that's a red herring, or just he's not even saying that under communism, like, retributive theory would be justified. He's certainly not saying that.
No, but he's saying the capitalism is the
bastardization of it, like, it will be.
But I'm asking the question genuinely. Like, I'm not trying to get a gotcha.
No.
I'm just genuinely asking, like, is the idea that capitalism is at the root of all this crime? Like, is it really the idea that non-capitalism of some sort would just have less crime because people wouldn't be tainted by this stuff? And so I'm just trying to find any example of like a non-capitalist society that wouldn't be taken as like an exception, or as like a.
There are examples of that, but at much smaller scales of society. Yeah. So you want large scale, and almost modern industrial society, but that's kind of one of those things that it is hard to disentangle.
Yeah, at the heart of it is my question about human nature. Like, at the heart of it is like, I'm wondering how, is there just, greed and human nature that's independent of capitalism? And that's just a hard question to answer.
Well, of course, you're right. And so actually, this gets to, I really want to talk about this attack on the veil of ignorance and original position thing, because it actually relates to what you just said. So this is what I find to be the most fascinating part of the critique. So he says the model of rational choice, this is on page 238 of the piece, found in social contract theory is egoistic, right? Rational institutions are that would be agreed to by calculating egoists or devils in Kant's terminology, in the quote that you just read earlier in the discussion, right? And, the Rawls also thinks of people who are calculating egoists, but they're under the veil of ignorance. And so Murphy asks, why give egoism this special status such that it is built a priori into the analysis of the concept of rationality? Is this not simply to regard as necessary that which may only be contingently found in the society around us? Starting from such an analysis, a certain result is inevitable, namely a transcendental sanction for the status quo. Start with a bourgeois model of rationality, and you will, of course, wind up defending a bourgeois theory of consent, a bourgeois theory of justice, and a bourgeois theory of punishment. And then what's interesting is that this bourgeois theory of punishment also operates, this is what a lot of critics of mass incarceration and a high police presence in a state, they will say this, that really what that's doing is keeping the ruling class in power and stopping people from revolting against it. And so you end up having this circle of a theory of rationality, which results in a theory of punishment, and that theory of punishment ends up reinforcing and preserving a condition that would produce that conception of rationality. And none of this it's not like a cabal of Illuminati people doing this. Like, this is just what naturally would arise. This is how, if you live under capitalism, you're going to just be prone to think, well, people are naturally greedy and people are naturally egoists. And that's also how we should understand rationality. I mean, we always make fun of economists and how they think of like how it's just so plainly irrational to turn down like a banana today when you could have 3 bananas in a week. Like, I do think that rationality as a concept is infected with all these things that are purely contingent and not some kind of a priori way that we have to understand rationality. And I really think this is an interesting part of the critique. I do also think that it undermines his right, individual rights respecting necessary condition at the beginning as well. I don't see how it does.
Yeah, it is funny that way.
Yeah.
I guess I found it less a rich analysis than you did, because it's unclear to me what he could mean by rationality. That's not like what is bourgeois rationality? Just he's taking like the Rawls position as saying that people are by nature selfish.
No, not by nature selfish. It's the conception of rationality in the original position is I will choose the institutions of justice that will most benefit me, but I don't get to know anything about my relative, fortunes. Or the thing that's rational is the thing that would benefit me the most when I'm behind the veil of ignorance. That's going to be the most rational kind of principles of justice, rational institutions under which we should live.
I mean, it is there is the appeal to self-interest that is, that is a pull there. But I also think a pull is what is a fair society. Like I think that if you're concerned about distribution of resources in society for the sake of everyone else, you might agree that not being tainted, say, by already being in the position of having being rich would allow you to see that what truly is fair is a just distribution, no matter who you are. That it doesn't seem that bourgeois to me, and I don't know what the opposite of a theory of rationality would be there. Like, what is the conception of rationality that he would defend? Like, I don't get that.
I think like you could imagine a conception of rationality that wants the best for everybody rather than just the best for yourself.
But that's what I think. But that's, I guess, what I'm saying. Like, I would read Rawls's original position argument to be a kind of decision about what's best for everybody.
But I don't think it's designed that way, though. It's supposed to be what's best for you. And the what's best for everybody only comes out if it does in the fact that you don't know where you're going to land in the society.
Yeah, but it's weird because it is used to motivate a true position of like equality for everybody.
Well, no, is it more redistributary than like your preferred philosophers and political scientists like Hayek, and for sure, like a Nozick? Absolutely, it is. This is where I really like this. It is a foundational attack on all of that. You know, whether it's Rawls or Nozick or whoever, if you are a rationalist about this.
Is what he's saying, if you had a different conception of rationality, then maybe we could start an argument about whether or not you can ground punishment in rationality?
Or if there was some unambiguously, intuitively true conception of rationality, then we could use that to try to mount this defense of retributivism. Maybe, you know, it might still suffer from the other problem. This is that we've already talked about, but at least it would be a starting point. But this just cuts it off right at the roots, because you're taking this conception of rationality that he thinks emerges under capitalism and bears full fruit in the Enlightenment. Like, this is why it's the deepest part of the critique. It doesn't even get the kind of Kantian or Hegelian or Rawlsian defenses of retributivism off the ground. Like, it can't even launch.
Yeah, I guess I'm just still not quite sure whether it's necessary for his argument, but like, we can move on. I just wonder if there were a society where everybody had this conception of rationality, say. Suppose that there was just like a bunch of bourgeois people and they were all like, yeah, this is totally what rationality is.
But that is our society. Like, I think he thinks that is our society.
No, because he thinks that people aren't actually endorsing this kind of social contract-y sort of thing.
No, he thinks that, of course, we're going to think that this is the one true rationality because we're products of the capitalist culture that we grow up in. But you know, when you're being a philosopher, this is not the only independently argued for or intuitively obvious conception of rationality as, you know, egoistic people living under certain conditions that we, you know, maybe a veil of ignorance or whatever. And so it doesn't matter if we all agree that that's the conception of rationality. Well, that makes no difference. Like, that's what you would expect, that we would embrace that conception of rationality.
You know, I guess I think that at heart, Rawls isn't saying that egoism is what rationality is. I thought Rawls was just saying, like, everybody has self-interest. Like, we all do. This is just a fact. We all want to survive. Like, just take that as a starting point.
But he takes more than that, like, in the original position. Like, he gives more to, it's not just wanting to survive. It is purely, you are out, when you're in the original position, you are out for yourself, and that's it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me that's what his concept of rationality is, though. I think he just thinks, let's start with all you know is you want to survive, like, you want to live, you don't want to like live a shitty life. Like, I don't think that's just what rationality is. I think it's just people have this self-interest. Now, you could argue that the argument fails because it is itself not rational. But to say that it's just his concept of rationality has this, it's like baked in falsely from the start, seems like odd. It doesn't.
I'm confused as to why. I don't quite understand your objection to this, because it's true that that's how Rawls determines what are the rational principles to adopt. Self-interested, like, people would choose behind the veil of ignorance. At least the early Rawls. He might have like eased up on some of the like Kantian aspects of, you know, that relies on this being actually rational rather than just what we all agreed to. So it could be that later Rawls is more along the lines of what you want to suggest. But I think that Rawls doesn't come about when he's writing this paper. And in any case, this is, I think, a good critique of that Rawls, the rationalist Rawls, because he doesn't think, oh, this is just our shared conception of rationality, and all we really want is to survive. He's like, no, you are trying to do what's best for you, and that's the rational, and whatever those things are what we're, what the rational principles of justice to adopt are. Yeah.
So, okay. Well, then I'll say I do agree that self-interest is not rationality, or at least it's not all of rationality. That's a mistake. And I'm just doing a terrible job of communicating what I think is weird about Murphy's argument here. But here's my last stab at it. There is the attack that you might make on whether or not people are fundamentally motivated by self-interest. And then there is what would follow from that, which is, I think, the steps that Rawls wants to take you on that he believes are motivated by rational, good reasons.
If we were fundamentally self-interested, is that?
No, that we might be, if you start with the premise that we're all fundamentally self-interested, then what would follow from that? And it could be that first step is just wrong. It'll never get off the ground because that's just a dumb conception of how humans are.
Or it's a contingent conception.
Contingent conception.
Yeah.
Or it could be that the steps after that are flawed rationality. And so if that's the critique, then I'm not sure what the rational steps would be. But maybe it's just so focused on this critique of whether or not self-interest is the starting point.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's the premise that he's attacking. He's saying that is the conception of human nature and rationality, but at that first level, that is a historically contingent way of understanding that. And I don't think he has a problem with the steps that come after that. It is that.
Well, that's why I started by saying, is it that the problem with egoism is part of human nature? And you corrected me.
Well, because it's not just part of human nature. It is all of it, in this conception. And that's the issue. I mean, look, and what I also really like about this is this idea of the result dictating the premises, because a lot of even Rawls, and certainly a lot of other social contract theories end up saying, so more or less we're good, we're justified in doing and having the rules that we have. And even Rawls, although less so than a lot of the others, can justify a good amount of inequality as rational,
and there's where I'm squarely anti, there's where I'm well, you just look, it doesn't seem to have met even what Rawls would consider a just society. Something is deeply wrong. There's something rotten in Denmark.
The one thing that pulls me away from this paper a little bit is just, and I think you sort of alluded to this early on, where you say, what does he want us to do? And it's so disconnected, this paper and this debate, from the facts about criminal justice and how justice is actually administered, which has nothing to do with retributivism, utilitarianism, any of it. All that theorizing at the I'm feeling this because I've been teaching this course, it's borderline offensive to be talking about this somewhat technical theoretical debate when that just doesn't seem in any way connected to what's actually happening in our criminal justice system, and way more so now even than at the time that he was writing, but certainly also at the time that he's writing.
Yeah, I agree. And somewhat ironically, because, the whole start of it was hey, these bullshit theories, don't have they don't apply to the real world.
Right.
And then at the end, I'm so how does yours apply? What I get it. I'm sympathetic to the argument. I just don't know how to apply it.
It's purely critical, this paper. I think that's something also, that I'm realizing even more. It is not offering a positive alternative whether it's a conception of rationality or a way to restructure society so that, retributivism could be applicable. It's not trying to do any of that. It is just a purely negative critique of the rationalist retributive theories of the time.
And you know what? I respect him for sticking to his retributivist guns, because I do think that a lot of people, when faced with arguments of a similar style, like when they say like most people don't deserve what they're getting, a lot of people do just fall back on, well, so then let's just justify in a utilitarian fashion. Like, let's just do our best to bring about the best society. And he just won't do it. He ends maybe one day we'll have a society where people can meet the conditions for being punished. Like, that would be an awesome society where people really deserve it in the Hegelian way.
Yeah. No, I mean, and he even somewhat hints at the idea that maybe, if we reoriented society according to more Marxist principles, there would not be that much crime to deal with in the first place. But that's just
But the people who are in prison would really deserve it.
Yeah, I guess. Exactly. Again, this is like 71, so this is Clockwork Orange time. This is, the therapeutic approach,
let's talk about that. Like, he really doesn't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is you are changing somebody's character against their own will without their consent. And you can do it indefinitely, really. It's like you wanted to slip a moral pill into, among other pills, into Nikki's drink.
I'm a utilitarian when it comes to that.
Yeah.
There is a quote. I do want to read his quote about, he says, so he's talking about the Bonger paper and or book that he loves. Like, he's all on the nuts of Bonger until he gets to the end. So he says, what does Bonger offer? He suggests near the end of his book that in a properly designed society, all criminality would be a problem, quote, for the physician rather than the judge, end quote. But this surely will not do. The therapeutic state, where prisons are called hospitals and jailers are called psychiatrists, simply raises again all the old problems about the justification of coercion and its reconciliation with autonomy that we faced in worrying about punishment. So yeah, like, he's consistent about this. Like, he's like, that's just as undermining of agency as this other stuff. Like, he's not like willing to go down the like, your brain made you do it, so therefore I'm gonna like treat
No. Yeah, definitely not. Yeah. I like this paper also because it is just, each step of the argument is very clear, and he will bite bullets when he has to. But this is kind of a nice model of making an argument. I do worry that it is arguing at this kind of epiphenomenal level that it's hard to see how this can actually impact, what's really behind the way we approach criminal punishment in a capitalist society and probably other societies too. It's like it feels like we're arguing about different things than is what's driving the approaches in reality, which, like you said, is kind of ironic because that's kind of his point
that's where
too.
It starts. Yeah. Do you think that I think he died actually, but do you think that
recently, I think Jeffrie Murphy.
Yeah. Do you think that he would say, at the very least, let's be more compassionate in our punishment? Like, is that a step in the right direction? Like, I mean, the severity of punishment for all sorts of crimes, especially for the economically, less fortunate is terrible. So I think anybody would argue that. But do you think that, like, given the current state of affairs, given that he thinks that the structure of society is what turns people into criminals, I don't think he would say, let's just stop punishing. And I don't think he would be willing to say, let's punish on utilitarian grounds. But like, if pressed for an actual prescription, would it just be like, well, let me just cut some of this shit out? Like, cut some of the punishment?
I mean, that's a good question. I think this is part of the problem with putting all your chips into the Kantian pot. It's like, if you're violating somebody's rights, whether you violate them for 2 years or 15 years, it's like, it's not that.
It's not justified. Yeah.
It's just not justified either way. And so I guess you could say it's less of a violation of somebody's rights, and so it's always good to do less of a violation of their rights than a greater violation. But so I don't know. I assume that he, like any decent person, would support lower sentences.
He's like, of course.
Yeah.
What kind of stupid question is that?
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought though about how that argument against Rawls might. It is interesting that he still sticks to his retributivist conceptions of rights when he's undermined the basis of the Rawlsian approach that might erode the basis of the whole approach.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, I think that's section where he takes on the original position there, like, I think that also undermines the whole rights-based approach in the first place, and so would undermine the formal correctness of retributivism, not just the material correctness.
Right? It's a risky move on his part.
Yep. He could be hoisted by his own Kantian petard.
I like that.
Well, maybe we could, maybe a title. We'll see.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, well, glad I got to talk about this paper. I'm glad you seem to not be too opposed to it.
No, whatever I had problems with, it was worth working through. In fact, just his outlining of the juxtaposition of his Kantianism and his Marxism, I just learned.
I wonder if he just kind of rejected his Kantianism after a certain point. Yeah. That would be the sensible thing, but you can't trust Kantians to be sensible, that's for sure. All right. Join us next time on Very Bad Wizards.
The great boss has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have.
Pay no attention to that man.
Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.